They scoffed at the scratched metal, pointing and laughing, until the human's bullet sent Razzy's head splattering across the cargo hold wall in a spray of gray matter and squirting orange arteries. The harsh glare from the single flickering fluorescent tube etched deep shadows across Varys' craggy face, his metallic left eye whirring faintly as it automatically adjusted to the Karenbar's dim lighting. Zolak slouched across the table, his frayed uniform hanging off his gaunt frame. The two grizzled veterans clinked their mugs of Crixen ale, the only thing strong enough to chase away their demons on nights like these. "Did you hear the latest about those damn humans?" Varys' gruff voice cut through the bar's low chatter. Zolak let out a non-committal grunt. "I stopped listening to rumors about those upstart primates long ago." "Remember when we first encountered them during the Crying Campaign?" Varys continued, ignoring his friend's apathy. "We thought their primitive weapons were a joke." Zolak sat up a little straighter, his eyes suddenly clearer. "I remember. We laughed our asses off at those ridiculous rifles and machine guns. Our boys were slinging around plasma cannons and railguns that could level a building with one shot, and there those humans were, armed with what looked like children's toys. But then a distant look overtook Varys' face. But then we saw those toys in action. It was on Crixa 4, that God's forsaken swamp planet where the fungus grew taller than trees. Our platoon got pinned down by a Crixan ambush. Bastards came out of nowhere. We sent out an SOS, but command said the nearest backup was still hours away. We thought we were dead meat." Varys took a long swig of ale before continuing, his voice low. Then he appeared like a spirit of vengeance sent by the gods themselves. This lone human soldier, built like an ox, came striding out of that fungal hell with the biggest damn gun I'd ever seen. Zolak leaned forward, fascinated. "I've never heard of such a weapon. Was it some experimental prototype the humans were testing?" Varys shook his head. "Not at all. Sergeant Rice said it was an ancient design, something called a Gatling gun that originated on Earth centuries ago, during their early industrial period." "How the hell did it work? And how could it be effective against Cryan advanced armor?" Zolak asked incredulously. "The gun had 6 rotating barrels, allowing an insanely high rate of fire for a kinetic weapon. Rice had modified it to use our standard power cells, so he basically never had to reload," Varys explained. "But the real secret was the ammunition, solid slugs of dense metal. When he opened up on the Crixans, it was like a goddamn meteor shower tearing through their ranks." "Oh, they adapted quickly enough," Varys said with a dry chuckle. "Sent in their heavy infantry, covered head to toe in reactive plating with portable barriers that could tank our rifle fire all day long. But Rice, crazy bastard, he just shifted aim and started popping off shots at their joints and weak points. Blew out a knee here. Vaporized an elbow there. Prick barely even slowed down." Zolak shook his head in disbelief. "Unreal. But even he couldn't hold off a whole army forever, right?" "You'd think so, but I shit you not. When the Crixans tried to Zerg rush him, he pulls out the biggest hand cannon I've ever seen. Called it a revolver or some such damn thing. Looked like it was meant to hunt dinosaurs. He nailed the Battlemaster square in the face, right through the helm slit, with one shot. One shot splattered that ugly fucker's brains across 3 zip codes." Zolak shook his head, struggling to comprehend the power of the human's archaic handgun. "A revolver that can take out a Cryan Battlemaster? Ridiculous. Those brutes are clad in armor that can shrug off close-range plasma blasts without a scratch." Varys leaned back, a smug grin spreading across his craggy face. "That's the beauty of human weapons, my friend. They don't rely on fancy energy beams or superheated plasma. It's all about raw kinetic power, and they've spent centuries perfecting the art of killing with it." He took a swig of his ale before continuing. "Rice told me afterwards that his hand cannon fired these massive rounds called .44 magnums. Apparently they were originally designed to take down large, dangerous creatures on Earth, creatures that could shrug off smaller bullets like raindrops." Zolak frowned, his brow furrowing, but the Crixans must have adapted their tactics after that first encounter. "They're a cunning bunch. They wouldn't just let the humans pick them off like that." "You're right. They did learn. Started using drones and long-range artillery to keep Rice and his Gatling gun at a distance. But the humans, they always seemed to have an answer." Varys shook his head, chuckling softly. "The Terrans deployed their own drones, these tiny insect-like machines that jammed the Cryan sensors and communications. It was like a swarm of metal locusts devouring their signals and leaving them blind and deaf." Zolak listened intently, his earlier apathy forgotten. "And then, when the Crixans were scrambling in confusion, the humans brought out their big guns. Rice called them howitzers, these massive artillery pieces that lobbed shells the size of a Thran's head. But it wasn't the size that made them so deadly, it was what they were filled with." Varys paused, his eyes distant, as if reliving a haunting memory. White phosphorus, they called it. When those shells burst, they sprayed this burning chemical everywhere, and it just kept burning. It clung to the Crixen's armor, sizzling and melting through the layers like a hot knife through grease. I saw warriors running, screaming as they cooked inside their own suits. Even the battlemaster, his armor was useless against it. He burned just like the rest of them. Zolak sat in stunned silence, trying to process the brutality of the human weapons. He had always thought of the Terrans as soft, their technology inferior, but this was something else entirely. Zack shuddered as Varys described the effects of Agent Orange. I can't even imagine. To poison the very land itself, to doom generations yet unborn. He shook his head, his face etched with a mix of horror and disbelief. How could they unleash such a thing? Varys sighed heavily, his gaze distant. Rice tried to explain it to me once. Said something about how, in war, you have to be willing to do whatever it takes to win. That if you're not ready to go all the way, to cross every line, then you've already lost. He took a long pull from his mug, as if trying to wash away the bitter taste of the memory. But still Zolak insisted, there have to be limits, rules of engagement, codes of honor. Otherwise, what separates us from the beasts we fight? Varys barked out a humorless laugh. Honor? The Crixens didn't give a damn about honor when they were slaughtering entire colonies, wiping out whole species. You think they would have shown us mercy if they'd had the upper hand? Zolak had no response to that. The Cryan cruelty was legendary, their atrocities numerous and well documented. Still, the thought of stooping to their level, of employing such indiscriminate weapons, it sat ill with him. What about the tanks? He asked, eager to change the subject. These Abrams, as you called them, how did they turn the tide? Varys' eye glinted with something almost like admiration. You should have seen them, Zolak. These massive, hulking beasts of metal and ceramic rolling across the battlefield like something out of a nightmare. The Crixens threw everything they had at them: plasma cannons, antimatter missiles. Even some sort of gravity-based weapon that could crush a normal tank into a ball the size of your fist. He leaned forward, his voice lowering as if sharing a secret. But the Abrams, they just kept coming. Their armor was unlike anything we'd ever seen, multiple layers of composite materials designed to react and adapt to incoming energy weapons. And when a round did manage to penetrate, there was another layer underneath. Some sort of self-sealing polymer that could plug a hole in seconds. Zolak's eyes widened. Incredible. And you said their main guns could penetrate even Cryan fortifications? Varys nodded grimly, like they were made of paper. The humans called the rounds depleted uranium, dense as hell, with a self-sharpening tip that could punch through meters of reinforced concrete. I saw an Abrams put a hole clean through a Crixen bunker, then keep right on rolling like it was nothing. He shook his head as if in disbelief at his own memories. That was when I knew, Zolak, when I realized that maybe we'd underestimated the humans. That maybe, just maybe, they were the ones we should have been afraid of all along. Zolak whistled softly, his eyes wide with wonder. A spacecraft that can outmaneuver Cryan fighters? I've never heard of such a thing. What did the humans call it? Varys leaned in, his voice low as if sharing a closely guarded secret. They called it the F-41 Starhawk. Apparently it was a top-secret project, years ahead of anything else in the galaxy. Sergeant Rice told me it could fly from a planet's surface straight into orbit, then engage enemy ships in the vacuum of space, all without a single external booster or rocket. Zolak's brow furrowed in confusion. But how is that possible? The energy requirements for something like that would be enormous, and the heat generated from atmospheric friction alone. Varys nodded, a slight smirk playing at the corner of his mouth. Rice said the same thing. Apparently the Starhawk uses some kind of advanced fusion drive coupled with a series of force fields that create a frictionless bubble around the craft. It can punch through an atmosphere like it's not even there. Zolak sat back, his mind reeling at the implications. Incredible. A single craft that can dominate the skies and the stars. With something like that, the Crixens wouldn't stand a chance. You're telling me? Varys agreed, draining the last of his ale. Rice said the Starhawk was just the beginning, too. The humans were already working on even more advanced designs, things that could potentially harness the power of black holes and manipulate gravity itself. Zolak leaned back, his eyes widening slightly. A small team against a fortified bunker? That sounds like suicide. Varys nodded grimly. It would have been for anyone else, but Rice, he had a plan. He and his men painted themselves up in these special suits, some sort of adaptive camouflage that blended them right into the terrain. They crawled through a half-mile of razor wire and minefields, silent as ghosts. The Crixans never saw them coming. Incredible, Zolak breathed. But even with the element of surprise, how did they take out the bunker? Rice had his Gatling gun, of course, but he knew that alone wouldn't be enough. So he also brought along a pack full of demo charges and a couple of those laser designators the humans love so much. Varys' organic eye glinted with admiration. They snuck up right behind the bunker, and Rice set up his gun while the others planted the charges. Then, on his signal, they lit up the designators, painting the bunker with invisible beams. That was the signal for the F-35s overhead. Zolak's mouth fell open. They called in an airstrike on their own position. Varys chuckled. Rice always did have a flair for the dramatic. Those free electron lasers sliced into the bunker like a surgeon's scalpel, carving apart the reinforced walls and exposing the Crixans inside. At the same time, Rice opened up with his Gatling gun, pouring a hail of lead into the breach. He shook his head as if in disbelief. It was over in seconds. The Crixans never had a chance to even react. One moment they were sheltered in their impenetrable fortress, the next, they were nothing but smears on the walls. Zolak sat in stunned silence for a long moment. That's incredible. The coordination, the precision required to pull off something like that, that's humans for you, Varys said with a shrug. They may look soft and squishy, but they're the most ruthless, adaptable killers in the galaxy. I pity any race foolish enough to underestimate them. Zolak gaped at Varys, his eyes wide with astonishment. Wait, so Rice and his men took on a fortified bunker guarded by Crixan elites with nothing but a few demo charges and a Gatling gun. That's insane, Varys chuckled, his grizzled face crinkling with amusement. Insane is putting it mildly. When I heard the explosion and the gunfire, I thought for sure they were all dead. But then, through the smoke and dust, I saw Rice emerge, his Gatling gun still smoking. Behind him, his men were mopping up the last of the Crixans, securing the bunker room by room. Zolak shook his head in disbelief. Unbelievable. But what about the Cryan reinforcements? Surely they had more troops in the area. Oh, they did, Varys nodded. But that's where Rice's real genius came in. See, he knew the Crixans would have a QRFA quick reaction force on standby. So before they blew the door, he had his comm specialist rig up a jammer, blocking the Cryan distress signals. By the time the QRF realized something was wrong, it was too late. Rice and his men were already dug in, using the bunker's own defenses against them. Zolak leaned back, his mind reeling. So that's it then. They held off the Crixans long enough for our own reinforcements to arrive. Not quite, Varys said, his voice turning somber. Rice knew they couldn't hold out forever, so he had his demolitions man rig up the bunker's reactor to blow. Once our forces were clear, he detonated it, taking the entire complex and the Cryan QRF with it. Zolak was silent for a long moment, processing the magnitude of Rice's sacrifice. Incredible, he said at last, his voice hushed with awe. To have the courage, the sheer audacity to pull off something like that. It's humbling. Varys nodded, his own eye distant. That was Sergeant Rice for you. He may have been human, but he had the heart of a Caterian warrior. I'll never forget him or what he did for us that day. Zolak shook his head slowly, trying to wrap his mind around the sheer scale of the humans' victory. Orbital bombardment. I can't even imagine the destruction. The Crixans must have been completely outmatched. Varys nodded, his expression grim. They never stood a chance. The human ships were like nothing we'd ever seen, sleek, powerful and armed with weapons that could level cities in seconds. The Crixans tried to fight back, but their own vessels were torn apart like paper in a storm. And their ground forces? Zolak asked, almost afraid to hear the answer. Crushed, Varys said flatly. The humans targeted their command centers, their supply lines, their strongholds. They used precision strikes to minimize civilian casualties, but they didn't hesitate to use overwhelming force when needed. I saw entire battalions wiped out in the blink of an eye. Their armor and weapons useless against the humans. Might Zolak was silent for a long moment, the weight of Varys' words sinking in. I had no idea, he said at last, his voice hushed. I knew the humans were powerful, but this is beyond anything I could have imagined. Varys leaned forward, his organic eye boring into Zolak's. That's the thing about humans, he said, his voice low and intense. They're not like us. They're not like any other species in the galaxy. When they set their minds to something, when they truly believe in a cause, there's nothing they won't do to achieve it. They'll fight with everything they have, use every tool and weapon at their disposal. Until their enemy is utterly destroyed. Zolak felt a chill run down his spine at the intensity of Varys' words. But surely, he said, grasping for some shred of hope, surely they showed some mercy. They didn't wipe out the Crixans entirely. Varys' gaze darkened, his voice dropping to a near whisper. Mercy? In their own way, yes. The humans offered the Crixans a choice: surrender, lay down their arms, renounce their ways of conquest and brutality, and submit to human rule. In exchange, the humans promised to help them rebuild, to guide them towards a path of peace and prosperity. Zolak's mouth fell open in shock. They offered them mercy? Even after everything the Crixans had done, Varys nodded slowly. It was a calculated move, one that ensured their dominance, but it came at a cost. The Crixans had to give up everything: their weapons, their ships, their very autonomy. They became little more than puppets, dancing to the human tune. And the humans, they didn't just take control of the Cryan government and economy, they infiltrated their very minds. Zolak's eyes widened. What do you mean the humans have this technology, this ability to hack into computer systems, to steal data and secrets? They used it on the Crixans on a massive scale. They learned everything, every weakness, every vulnerability, and they exploited it. Varys' voice dropped to a whisper. They used that knowledge to manipulate the Crixans, to control them from the inside out. They infiltrated their media, their education systems, even their religious institutions. They rewrote the Cryan history, their very identity, to suit their own purposes. The Crixans may have survived, but they're no longer truly Cryan. They're something else, something twisted and broken, forever dependent on their human masters. Zolak shook his head, horror etched across his face. That's monstrous. To not just defeat an enemy, but to destroy their very sense of self. Varys nodded, his expression grim. It's a fate worse than death in many ways, and it's a testament to the human power, their ruthlessness. They may have started out as primitives with their ancient weapons and their crude tactics, but they've evolved faster than any of us could have imagined. And now, with the Galactic Council under their sway and the most advanced technology in the universe at their fingertips, the future itself belongs to them, for better or worse. The two veterans fell silent, each lost in their own dark thoughts as the din of the bar washed over them. Outside, the stars glittered coldly in the void, indifferent to the machinations of mortal beings. But even their eternal light seemed to flicker and dim, as if cowed by the long shadow of human ambition that stretched across the galaxy, inexorable and unstoppable. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel. For every comment that says, we will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.